Hey everyone. As you can see on the slide, my name is Nastassia, maybe very difficult to pronounce, but just remember it's Nastassia, not Anastasia, because I'm frequently asked about that. So my topic today is about discovery, and I would like to share some maybe bad or good experiences I had working in different domains. But as you can see, I'm a business analyst, and mostly I worked as a BA in fintech and e-commerce companies. It doesn't matter whether it was a startup or a corporation, but the domain matters because I will be presenting the examples from these domains. And I would like to show some hints, tips and tricks of how to make the discovery not a one-time off event, but something that lasts throughout your sprint, and this is the activity that you can really benefit. But before we dive into the topic, so let me just thank our sponsors for making this event happen, because this is, an opportunity for me, for example, to come as a speaker here. I'm based in Poland, so being here in Spain just for this conference, that's thanks to our sponsors and of course to the Software Crafters team. Okay, so let me maybe some of you would be shocked, because I was shocked when I saw these statistics, this uncomfortable truth about features, about the product development domain, I would say. Because most of the features, as you can see, 64% are the features that we are building, that we're analyzing, building and testing, are rarely used or never used by the users. So imagine like almost 2/3 of things that we are kind of, devoting our, creativity, our time, our effort is not used. I was shocked. Of course, it's like you may find that the source is not so, I would say, fresh, because it's from 2014, but this is the most official, source I could find to bring in the statistics, and it's publicly available from the Chaos report. And at the same time, based on other findings, I saw that 30 to 50% was spent of our sprint time, of our overall sprint capacity, was spent on rework. So this is something that definitely should, alarm and, sound like an alarm in our heads that something is not efficient that we are doing. And this is like a famous meme, right? Because I knew that I was going to present in front of developers, and you all, like most of you are technical people and you like memes. So let's proceed. Let's do a quick check to see maybe I'm alone here, right? So imagine your backlog and all the items that currently sit in your backlog. So please raise your hands if you're 100% sure that every item that's sitting in your backlog will deliver value to users and will matter to users. Yeah, this is expected. That's the honest answer. Frankly speaking, even now, I also can't raise my hand in this case. But yeah, we're here to learn, and maybe, next time we meet and we talk about discovery, something changes here. Most teams treat discovery as a one-time event. So they start discovery as sprint 0, and for example, spend 2-3 weeks spending talking to stakeholders, to users, having a few interviews, maybe workshops, and creating few journey maps, for example. Then it stops. Then this is something that is being frozen in time. Then they proceed to design, build, test phase. Eventually they celebrate this release phase. But unfortunately, this happens most of the times, that we are building something that because we didn't question whether it's something worth building or not. And that's the main problem I see, because discovery as a habit is something that I would like to encourage you to use. Maybe not from tomorrow. Tomorrow is a day off, but maybe from Monday. Okay, so let me share a quick example of a failure that I had. I was working in a fintech company, and one of the features that we were working on was related to invoice reconciliation. And we managed to have a discovery, like normal discovery, 3 weeks. We did everything what was prescribed by normal standards, best practices. So we collected user feedback and understood the main point, because accountants were complaining that manual reconciliation is killing them. That was their comment. And we spent 8 weeks on development. So I would say perfect code, 0 bugs in production, everything works, flawless QA. So guys did a great job here. Of course, we celebrated launch because that feature we thought would change everything, that we are, the let's say business people will start believe us more because we are here to solve their problems, and we are kind of magicians because we have the power to code and to implement to, make their lives easier on a day-to-day basis. But unfortunately, after 2 weeks, we understood that the feature that we built wasn't used. Just the adoption rate was under 5%. Everyone felt frustrated because we didn't understand why this happened. And we started, talking to users, to the accountants, and it turned out that in the meantime, while we were building the product, this feature, during these 8 weeks, they found some workaround in Excel and just shared it. And it worked. So why to, why to build something new if Excel works, right? And Excel will work in most of the cases, at least in fintech domain. That's why, we turned out in this situation where the team solved yesterday's problem, unfortunately. So as you can see, without proper discovery being done in parallel with our development work, we just wasted 8 weeks of development and got zero impact. So zero, let's say, satisfaction from business side. And here I would like just to summarize main consequences that would happen if we are to continue treating the discovery as a one-time event. Of course, the massive rework. As you've seen from the statistics, almost half of the sprint time and our capacity was spent on doing something, on fixing issues, which we could have caught earlier, for example, if we just questioned ourselves whether it's worth building or not. At the same time, in my teams, I observed this, developer demotivation as one of the key pain point, because I understand them. So they were, building everything as per user stories, as per requirements defined in the backlog. They were, spending their time, their effort, apply their creativity skills. But at the same time, they're here to learn, tomorrow when they are back to work after the release day, they understand that, this is something that users are not happy about, and we are to tweak something. It doesn't bring, new learning to my team, to my technical team. That's why it demotivates the team in general. And the last point here, but I guess also one of the most important ones here, to highlight that we are often unfortunately missing the outcome. So what I mean is that we are tracking wrong metrics. Of course, as a BA working in agile teams, I used to, look at different metrics like velocity, number of features shipped, some time frame within we released this feature. That's important, some kind of, something to track. But we were not tracking outcomes. It was just, we released something, it went to users, and that's not our problem. Whether it was used, whether it was, the customers wanted, the users and users of the applications wanted to change something, we didn't bother, because the business had other things for us to do. Of course, we're just, humans, and we have our own personal life, so we can't sit at work and work, throughout the day and night and checking everything. So that's why it's important for us to include this discovery into our day-to-day work, so that we have, confidence that we are building something that truly matters. And even for myself, when I see something, I can't, be proud of something that is not working, or that I don't have big numbers, cute statistics to show, for example, on the conferences, right? Something worked because we didn't track that, for example, or it didn't work, as in the previous example. So this is the key insight for me as a BA, looking at this product development stuff. And when we treat discovery as a phase, it means that we freeze these assumptions in time. And by the time the code, is going to be written or started, these assumptions might be old, because users change, market shifts. So it's something that we should pay also attention to. And discovery as a habit, it's something that allows us to keep, this learning curve every time in our team, and boost our satisfaction. Also, I would say it's also good for self-development for all these, interpersonal and soft skills. But at the same time, we also keep proving to the business side that we are here to make something valuable. Let's start with the first habit. So it's related to assumption mapping. Frankly speaking, it's one of my favorite ones because it's very simple, it's fast, and it works. That's the main point. Let's see how, to understand what assumption mapping is, you can look at it from this angle that every user story, every requirement, whatever format you choose, has its own assumptions or guesses. For example, users would want this feature, that's a guess. Our system can handle this amount of data, that's a guess. This workflow, this business logic makes sense, that's also a guess. It's just nothing that is confirmed. Someone said, of course, often it comes from the business side, that it would work, and you just should do it, right? But solution to this problem can be assumption mapping. It's very simple 15-minute technique that helps you make the invisible assumptions visible. And to do so, you can use the specific tool, but frankly speaking, it's just simple grid where we see evidence compared to risk. And one of the important points here to highlight is that it works in any sprint planning. So you don't have to have any specific templates. You don't have to have, an additional meeting to have this, habit to work. And anyone can participate. And especially I encourage that developers or, solution architects, someone technical would participate because they usually have this, I would say technical perspective that helps us, the business, see that something maybe not work, or maybe this is not a good practice to do so, right? Bringing this technical perspective to the assumption mapping technique, to this, meeting where it's discussed, it's very important. Now, case studies. So every time I will be sharing some case studies from my experience. So this was the e-commerce platform, and we got a business request that as a user, I want to export my transaction history to CSV format so that I can analyze this later in Excel. And basically it sounded very clear and straightforward, but at the same time, we started thinking, so how do we know, so you can see this question on the slide, but basically it means, how do we know that this feature worked? What are the assumptions that we are sure about? What are the risks? So nothing is known. So just one liner from the business as a regular practice, unfortunately. So when we questioned that, so just in 5 minutes, together with the team, we managed to come up with the 7 assumptions. No need to read them. They just ran from some technical stuff, some compliance rules, and everything else. So we, for example, we were not sure, it wasn't mentioned anywhere that users would want CSV format, not other format. Why CSV? So maybe they want to use not Excel but Google Sheets, for example. This is something that is unknown. For us, this exercise helped us to bring out whatever lived in our heads. This is not something new that we should brainstorm, so should come up with. This is the knowledge, this is the understanding that lives in everyone's head. Everyone, I mean the team around the table discussing this specific feature. And that's, the beauty of this technique, that it doesn't, force you to create something new, to add, new procedures so that developers, it's another meeting, so I won't go, and, this happens. But it's something that, okay, guys, let's just, I can be this one taking notes and just listen whatever you say, but just think about it so that everyone has the shared understanding of what the assumptions and risks are. And to do this exercise, this is just a framework. I try to just literally, explain it in a very simple way that on X-axis you have evidence. It shows you how confident you are in your assumptions, right? Ranging from low to high. At the same time, you have risk, which is also from low to high, but it helps you answer the question, what if this assumption is wrong? What are the consequences? How severe they are? So as you can see, this danger zone is something that, that's why it's red. It's something that, alarms that these assumptions have to be tested immediately, because they have, low evidence and high risk. If something goes wrong, it means that a lot of, time would be and money would be invested in rework later on. So, getting back to my example with the CSV export feature, we identified 2 items being in this red zone. So, database performance and PI exposure. The next step was for us to validate these assumptions. We started with the red ones. So database performance we validated with 50,000 records in tests, and they all passed. But PI exposure, we had to consult with compliance department to see whether we are not breaking any rules. And as a result, we decided to allow expert of fields that were approved by compliance department. As you can see, 2 critical bugs were identified and tested in just 15 minutes, and it saved us approximately 2 or 3 weeks. We didn't go this way, so we managed to succeed here. But if we were wrong in any of these assumptions, it would cost us 2 or 3 weeks of development. And that's something that is important to note, that your team prevented this rework. This also can help you show the value of your team to the business side. It's just a side effect of this technique. So moving next, this is the second habit, is hypothesis framing, and it changes the way how we treat user stories, because most of the times I see that teams, when they see the user story, they start just coding straight away. No questions, nothing. But as a BA, I don't have time, to spend a lot of, effort to put every detail that I know about this user story in Jira, for example. That's why I would like developers to question me. Maybe I missed something, right, when I talk to business. So this is something that helps us do this. Traditional user stories, this is something that were just treated as requirements, ready to build. No questions. But as you can see, if you remember the format of the user stories, as a user, I want this specific feature so that I can get some benefit. It's already the solution. It's already the execution part. It's not the discovery. And the hypothesis framing allows us to have hypothesis, like we believe that X feature for users Y will benefit because it will bring us outcome Z. That's the general concept, right? So here we question whether this specific feature, this specific, system or part of the application, even worth considering building. Not something that we would just build, because you can see that our mindset shifts from this point. User stories tell us just go and build, but at the same time, hypothesis framing helps us, question, test if it would solve your problem, because you have problem and you can have multiple solutions to this problem. And now I would like to show you the case study that I had working in e-commerce with the e-commerce application. And one of the main problems we had, it was that our users were drowning in notifications, like literally, hundreds of notifications a day, like emails, promos, SMS, pushes, everything. In-app notifications as well. So we, as we see, our problem was that most of the users, they just switched everything off. But because it was an e-commerce platform where customers could buy products, they could miss one switching of the literally like the full functionality of notifications. They were to miss some important ones about payment, about orders, and so on, about delivery, for example, or if something changes in their order. And from the business, we got this requirement, as you can see in the form of user story, that as a user, I want to have customization for my notification preferences so that I can only receive notifications I care about. That was the business requirement, I would say. Also sounded straightforward, but there were no evidence that customization of notifications would bring results. That this is the core, this is the reason of the problem that we are having, that we are trying to solve. That's why we questioned that. And that was the first time, by the way, we used this hypothesis framing. It was just a novel framework that I read about and decided, let's do this. If it won't work, it won't work, but it worked. Just a little spoiler. So this is like on the left side, you can see the framework, the template, and on the right side, this is the part that we filled in with the team based on our case. So we start with the phrase, we believe that. Here we should indicate what specific feature or system or application we are trying to build, right? In our case, it was given active buyers customization. 4, then you have to define specific audience or your target users, not just users. It's too generic. It's very hard to track later on. So just please focus on some specific, segment of users. In our case, they were active buyers who made 3 or more purchases per month. And this will result in? Now we should indicate some measurable outcome, whether it will be some business KPIs. In our case, we were tracking opt-outs, IRCTRs, and we indicated specific, I would say, measurements, specific values for these KPIs. In our case, it was 30% fewer opt-outs and 15% more of click-through rates. We measured by, so here we just list all the metrics that we should be tracking. Again, customization rate, opt-out rate, click-through rate, and time spent in settings. In here comes one of the important and key points here, that we all will know that we are right when now we have to set the success threshold. So this is the parameter for us to know, the indicator to know whether when we build something, whether it worked or not. Because if we build and no result later on, we are not sure whether this thing that we implemented literally solved the problem. This was the core reason to the problem. It's very hard to guess. Then that's why I insist every team to think at least of some, at least some rough estimations of your success beforehand, before you start building. So when you hear some feature that you need to implement some feature, just start thinking about measurements. That's quite an important step here. So in our case, we identified that we would like to we understand that this was the real reason for this, that had helped solve us this specific problem if more than 50% of customers would use this customization within 2 weeks. At the same time, we identified the failure to understand that it's not one of the reasons to this problem, right? So we had failure criteria, and for this specific example, we set them to be less than 20% of customers would use this specific feature after 4 weeks. This feature being implemented. And we'll validate within here, you just indicate the time frame that you're aiming for. In our case, we just wanted to see, to observe this feature being in production for 4 weeks and get some first results. Now I would like to show you the result that we got. So as I mentioned, so we started with the simple rollout. It means that we built the MVP, very lightweight MVP of this customization feature. It was just basically some, categories, just literally toggles. Something very simple so that we are not investing too much time in the development. And we rolled out this feature to just 25% of these active users, just to see, not to 100% because it was too risky, right? And before that, we instrumented everything. So who customized, what was changed, what was the user behavior, how it shifted, and so on. After 2 weeks, we started because it was, you remember, right? From the success criteria template, it was the first, time point, let's say point in time where we should track something, right? And we checked that customization rates, it wasn't too good. So we got just 12%. So literally 12% of customers, used that feature, and the goal was 50%. You see that it didn't work. At the same time, opt-outs, for some reason, were down for 40%, sorry, while the goal was just 30%. And you can see, it's strange, right? The feature that we built, it didn't help. It wasn't the core reason of this problem, but at the same time, the problem kind of solved. Later on, we followed up with some key users, we created a few focus groups and managed to identify this key insight that users wanted to have less noise, just get more relevant notifications straight to the point. Maybe we need to improve triggers, improve timing so that they are not switching them off. And this is the beauty of this specific technique of the hypothesis framing, because the team managed to change our direction, so not to proceed with building this expensive customization feature, but we just changed the direction and switched to something else. So we understood that the problem was already in existing features. So our notifications just didn't work. That was the problem. And we had to improve, the settings inside of these notifications on our backend. So implemented fewer triggers and implemented better timing. As an outcome, you can see that this problem that the business came up with was solved in 2 weeks, not in 3 months if we were to spend the whole time devoted to this feature on development. And also one of the important points is that no extra features were required. So basically, we just needed to improve the existing functionality. So not just building for the sake of building, but just being conscious of why we're building this and what benefits it can bring. Yeah, moving next to discovery spikes. It's the third technique. So this is something that I always like, but because in my teams, developers are already used to using these spikes, and you can treat these spikes as some investigation, right? And to understand what the spike is, if you're not familiar, so this is something that's an activity which is time boxed, lasts 2 to 4 hours, it's maximum, and it helps us answer one clear question. It's not production code. It's just knowledge that we get and share with everyone across the team. So the goal here is to answer one risky question, to learn whether it's worth doing this way or the other way. And when to use it when the uncertainty is very high, when you have, for example, like complex integration with a new provider, for example, when the user behavior is not known or it's like the first time you're implementing this feature, it's good to invest this small amount of time to investigate and explore the core problem. So how does discovery spikes work? If you don't know, so the first step is to plan. Just spend 5 minutes defining the question. So this is the question, whether we're building this and what options do we have, for example, right? Also define the time box, no more than 4 hours. It's also, not to have like analysis paralysis, it's called, right? When you just analyze and can't stop. So just define success to be enough to decide, not strive for perfection here. And just outline the method, whether it will be just discussion with some other team, for example, if you have streams, or if it would be a quick test or a prototype, whatever. And the second part, which is related to documentation. So just capture everything you learned, everything that you think was a risk, for example, a recommendation, how confident you are about your findings, and share next steps if you feel that you are capable to do so. Whether next spike is needed to proceed the exploration, whether we can just literally start building based on your analysis, and so on. So that's quite simple. Moving to the case study I had. It's again from fintech domain, and we were building, we were working on the B2B invoicing platform, but the feature was related to introducing invoices that would support multiple currencies, as you can see, euros, pounds, and dollars. That was also great until the moment one developer asked, so how are we going to handle the exchange rates? Great question. I didn't think about it because for me it was like very simple task, right? And as you can see, we had three passes in front of us. So live rates, of course, they are more accurate, but at the same time, they have to have multiple API calls throughout the day. And assuming that we had like thousands of invoices generated per day, it would also be very costly. At the same time, we could have just daily snapshots. So fetch API just once a day, store it locally. It isn't so precise, but at the same time, it's kind of a solution. And we can allow our users to manually change the rates by themselves. It's the full control over the rates, but at the same time, it requires some additional work from the users, which is not always should be implemented, I guess. And these are the results. And here, just I tried to capture all of the things that we were discussing in this spikes, what the analysis went through. So we tried to analyze the three possible solutions that we had. From the perspective of 4 aspects. So the technical one, we identified that, not me, don't be afraid, not me, it were mostly developers. So they found out that, generating of one invoice just delays the response for 200 milliseconds, which is not bad, but if you generate 100 of invoices, it's already a few extra seconds of delay for the end users using the system. At the same time, daily snapshot is an instant performance. So some pros and cons of different approaches. From the user perspective, we conducted a few interviews and identified that 95% of our users were fine to have not very precise rates, and they were fine with daily updates of the rates. And only 5% of the users, they were complaining and requesting this future system and feature to have a manual override, because some high-value invoices, or when they had some urgency and some precision was needed, they needed to have the manual override capability. And comparing the cost, of course, for daily snapshot, it was one of the most convenient ones, because you have just to make one API call a day, and live rates were very expensive solution for at that period of time. At the decision, so based just it was a 3-hour spike, we managed to come to the conscious decision that we would apply daily snapshot with manual override, so that we are covering 100% of our user needs. And we decided to fetch the rates once a day in the morning, store it locally, and use it in the invoices. And you can see that this very simple exercise, just 3 hours we spent, and it helped us avoid about 2 weeks of wrong building if we were to try, because this also helped us to have the architecture built right from the start and not doing something differently later on. And of course, we had high confidence that our users will be happy, because we managed to cover 100% of user needs. And moving to the last technique for today, I know that it's already too much, but I would like to share. This is something that helps us, the feedback loops, they help us see the results, the impact of our development, not just after we shipped something, but while we are doing so. So to understand the feedback loop, just you have to know that it's continuous learning curve that runs from build, measure, learn, adjust, and repeat into development. And without feedback loops, it's very hard to adjust your development while you go, and because you don't have you lose this connection with the user needs, and you are just being stuck and have very limited visibility on what's needed and what's not. And with having the feedback loops, it can help you detect problems early, and maybe change direction fast enough when it's not too late. So how to build the feedback loop? It's very important, and I highlighted this a few times already, that to build this instrumentation. So to add measurements. If the feature, the system, the platform you are building is not measurable, maybe it's not worth building or start building, right? So you need to define the metrics beforehand. So you can create dashboards at different tracking events to make this happen. The second step is about learning as you go. So you shouldn't roll out this feature straight away to 100% of users if you're not sure, right? To test that, you can just start with the simple rollout of 10% of users and then see how it works with them. If something needs fixing, then you fix and expand later to 25, 50, and 100%. But at the same time, don't forget to share your knowledge and maybe have just 15 minutes a week to exchange whether you learned something new or not this week, right? From the measurement that you are monitoring, and keep learning. So it's also not, a feedback loop is not something that you should abandon measuring something post launch. No, it's something that you should also keep track of. Just, I would advise to keep an eye of the feature for 2 to 4 weeks post launch to see how it behaves. And this is the right time to have, some maybe shadowing with users to see how they literally use the application, because no chart can, say how people think unless you see how they work, right? And you can also compare your hypothesis to the actual user behavior with your specific feature. So going quickly through the example that I have, I was working on the fintech app. And we were, the problem that we had, our users had a lot of transactions, and we didn't have search. But for some reason, I don't know, it was just inherited this way. And we needed to implement a search functionality. And the problem was that, we had this hypothesis, this is like the combination of the techniques. When we believe that adding search will improve our KPIs, so that it would cut down the time of finding specific results by 50% and drive high user adoption to our application and to the transaction history in particular. Before building, we Together with the team, we managed to come up with metrics. So we, tried to anticipate how many results will be there with 0 results, for example, how many clicks we expected, time spent, and so on, right? And the goal was to, here in the feedback loop technique, is to learn from real behavior. So let's say test our hypothesis in the field. And our rollout plan was, as I mentioned previously, it's very simple. So it started with just 10% of users, because we would be able to fix fast and expand with confidence. As a result, after 3 days of this feature being rolled out to 10% of users, we saw one unpleasant surprise that 40%, like about 40% of searches, they resulted like no results. Of course, we got some complaints, different complaints in support channels and so on, that the feature doesn't work, I can't find, and so on. But it turned out that users used to type providers' names in the search field. But our system worked differently, so we just implemented search by categories, because we thought that our users use the system this way. And it was just a huge assumption. And it was very unpleasant that it didn't work, but at the same time, we were happy that only 10% of users saw this I can't say I'm recorded, so this thing, right? So, bad user experience. So our goal was there to proceed, because we saw that it literally was very popular with users and helped solve their needs and their problems. So we spent 2 days, next 2 days, for fixing this search. So we improved fuzzy search, also introduced a search by provider names, added some descriptions, and managed to retest the same feature with the same audience, 10%. And just a few days later, we found out that our 0 result rate was 40%, and we had 8%, which was fine, which was acceptable based on the metrics that we had. And users were able to find all the relevant content within 1-2 searches, which was also fine. And as you can see, feature adoption was also quite high, like it was up to 34%. That was the power of feedback loops. Now I would like to show you the general picture of how these techniques work together. You might be wondering, maybe they don't work together, right? But they, as you can see on this slide, this diagram, that they work and can operate as one system. Because assumption mapping, this is something that helps you see what is unknown and what the risks are. This is like the starting point, right? Then you proceed with hypothesis framing, when you make these assumptions measurable, because you define metrics. Then you start discovery spikes to see the hypothesis framing, that the hypothesis you defined. You can just have spikes on them to see if they are worth implementing or not. And at the same time, feedback loops. This is something that can run throughout your sprint, but at the same time, don't forget to track everything post-launch as well. And if you imagine your working week, right? How you can do this? Like literally, I go tomorrow, on Monday, I will be at work. So how do I start? On Monday, you can have like planning, right? When you map assumptions, of course, this is something that, to remember, developers should be present. It's also important to have them map the assumptions. Then you frame hypotheses, pick spikes. And you see these activities like just 5-10 minutes maximum. And you can do it during your planning, backlog refinement or planning sessions. At the same time, through Tuesday to Thursday, you are running this 1 or 2 spikes. And usually developers lead these activities. Of course, as a BA or as a product manager, you can participate by providing some inputs and so on, but mostly this is something technical. At least I used to do this way. And don't forget to build instrumentation first. And remember about this life hack of rolling out to just 10% or let's say 20% of users, not 100% at a time, to see if it works. And on Friday, you share what you learned. This is also an important activity just to see whether your assumptions from Monday were confirmed through your experiments, through your spikes or not. And on retro sessions, whenever you have in 2 weeks or in a week, you have time to see your assumptions that were wrong, the risks that you managed to prevent or didn't. Maybe something surprised you. And also, it's very important to celebrate things that you didn't have to build. It's one of the core things, and I'm very happy that this is and also it's like not related to my topic today, but it's also important to highlight to business that you're here not just to build whatever is told, but you're here to think, to analyze this, and give your recommendation whether to proceed with the development, and if proceed, through which specific solution, which specific technique, feature, or whatever. So if you remember just a few key takeaways from today, because I am sure that you have heard a lot of information from other speakers as well, that remember that treating discovery as a phase is something that creates false certainty. So it's not something that you are sure about. You have to list them, analyze, assess the risks, and see whether you are ready consciously to accept this risk or not. And to learn, to do this, to decrease your uncertainty level. The 4 techniques which are listed on the slide will help you. So assumption mapping, hypothesis framing, discovery spikes, and feedback loops. This is something that helped me in different examples. And remember, there's like no way you can do this all in one go, right? Start small. This is like the best advice I was given at the beginning of my career. Everything starts small. In your personal life, in your career, start small, right? So just pick one habit out of this, whichever you like, right? Pick one story, the most risky one, for example. And in one sprint, when you have just a few spare minutes, just devote to understand how this technique works and to analyze the story from this perspective. So this way you can prove value, and then when it works for you, or maybe it didn't work, this also happens. You can switch to another technique because maybe in your specific context, in your specific domain, some other techniques would work and would be more beneficial. Yeah, thanks for today. That's my LinkedIn if you want to connect. But yeah, I was very happy to participate. Now I want to drink some water. Thanks.